the international humanitarian law. And as you have witnessed and noticed, our work has always been impartial. So thank you, and Khalid Khalifa is here. We will sign the last agreement.
للتأكيد أيها السادة الحضور، هذه الاتفاقية يوقعها مركز الملك سلمان للإغاثة والأعمال الإنسانية ممثلا عنه معالي المشرف على المركز الدكتور عبد الله الربيعة، وهذه الاتفاقية توقع مع المفوضية السامية لشؤون اللاجئين لتنفيذ مشروع في مجال الإيواء في محافظات يمنية عدة. ندعوكم أيها السادة الحضور لحضور الجلسات الجانبية واستكمال ما تم بدءه من يوم الأمس. ألف شكر.
Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you.
And I want to introduce myself as well. I'm Niveen Afyouni. I work as a chief sub-editor for Sky News Arabia. And I've covered many war zones and crises. And today we're going to discuss the innovation and reform in humanitarian aid. So, as you all know, innovation is vital in saving lives in humanitarian disasters and has the potential to greatly improve humanitarian performance by finding new and improved ways for helping those in need. There are many factors playing roles in vital changes in our lives, ranging from climate change to population growth to urbanization. All play a role in the urge for an advancement for aid agencies. Now, the work of humanitarian aid workers has become more challenging. With the wars and natural disasters, the number of people affected by crises has almost doubled, yet the cost of assistance has almost tripled. Jan, can we continue doing the same and expect different results, or we need new ideas?
Thanks very much, Niveen. Very good to be here. Many thanks to KS Relief for this big conference. We need Saudi Arabia as a strong, principled, and committed and generous donor all over the world. And I hope this is the beginning of a big global effort of Saudi Arabia to help us where the needs are greatest. Indeed, I have over very many years, too many years now, been involved in humanitarian work, and I think the trends are pretty clear over these last, especially 20, 30 years. We have seen assistance become much more effective. I mean, you referred to new technology. That's been taken on board pretty well by many humanitarian organizations. When I look back on how we did famine relief in the 1980s, for example, I find us utterly amateurish, and we treated the so-called beneficiaries in a very paternalistic way. And our humanitarian efforts were actually very inefficient. They were not effective at all. Over recent years, you see how mortality has gone down, morbidity has gone down, malnutrition has also gone down, education has gone up, disease control has gone up in most of the wars and most of the natural disasters of our time. The problem is protection. We're not able to reach a lot of people with all of our fantastic tools and with all of our courageous relief workers, because men with guns and power deny us access, make it impossible for us to come to besieged areas. Militias roam in areas, making it impossible for relief workers to really be there with women, children, and others when they need us the most. So I would say that general trend is really nagging me. Where we are allowed to do work, we can do much better work than ever before in human history, but it's too much medieval, repression preventing us from doing the right thing and good thing for political, strategic, and military reasons. And we need to fight that. We need, as humanitarians, to call a spade and tell the world where we are failing.
Yeah, and you spoke something interesting about the besieged areas. And if we want to go to Syria, and nowadays Syria is in the headlines, especially the eastern Ghouta. I know of small groups who use drones to deliver food to besieged areas in Syria. Yeah. Now, has this increased in a way the speed of aid reaching hostile zones? Or do they need to work more on such creative ideas?
No, I think the besieged areas of Syria is a typical case in point of failure, mostly failure, and where even the best of technology cannot really upset the lack of humanitarian access. Now, what is a besieged area? There are three criteria that are met before we call it a besieged area. It's full military encirclement, no freedom of movement for civilians in nor out, and no humanitarian access, relief, in over a sustained period of time. The UN says 3 months. Some say it should only be a month before you declare it. Some would say it takes half a year to declare it. So in Syria, there's been, a year ago there was 1 million people in these besieged areas. Today there would be around 500,000 people. One area could be reached when it was besieged up until half a year ago, could be reached by airdrops. Deir ez-Zur, which is in a desert in the east of Syria, and it proves my point how fantastic the technology of assistance has become. World Food Programme was able, in the end, to draw up the logarithms to do airdrops from 6,000 meters high and hit a drop zone in this place, which was a big football field they had there. Why couldn't we do airdrops to any of the other places? Because there were smaller urban areas. We would have killed as many people.
Well,
yeah, the pallets, 1-ton pallets would have killed people because it's too densely populated. And a drone is too small. You cannot feed tens of thousands of people with...
it carries 2 to 3 kilograms.
With 2 to 3, I mean, it would be one family per day. And they would have shot it down. So these are very cruel people besieging. So the one way to helping besieged people is to convince the men with guns and power to allow the non-combatants, the civilians, to get the relief they deserve.
How can he convince them without them taking part of the aid? I know this is another debate in humanitarian aid as well.
Well, to convince, of course, you have to convince the people besieging a place, and they are usually well fed. They don't need the food. I mean, like in Syria, mostly it's been the government forces, or it has been the
militias.
Hezbollah, or it's been the Islamic State, for example. Those three have besieged in Syria. They don't need food. What they want is to starve out the soldiers inside, and they don't care less about the civilian population. You have to convince them that it is the right thing to help. And if we can help civilians on the other side, their civilians will be helped elsewhere, including in Foua and Kefraya, which are 2 places that is besieged by armed opposition groups up in Idlib, and where people loyal to the government are inside.
So through your experience, Jan, how do you think we can reshape aid through technology? How can we reshape aid through technology?
Well, we are reshaping aid through technology. I mean, for example, there is one thing that many call a revolution now, is cash and vouchers, which is something I wholeheartedly support. It means, before, all relief was basically humanitarians like me deciding what we thought that a population needed, and then a truck driver with a beard often going to the place and giving them boxes with what we thought they would need. Now we give families, very often the mothers, cash on their mobile phone or on their smart card, so that they can go to the market and buy what the family needs. I was even in the DR Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo, a really neglected mega emergency. even there, I mean, illiterate widows now get cash on their card or on their phone, and they go to the local merchant and they buy the food they need, or they can even use it to pay school fees in their local place, local school, if that is what they need. I would want cash if I was in that situation. You would want it. So why don't we give that also to the beneficiary, the people that we are there to help?
But see, there are technologies, and obviously the cards you're talking about and the cash is applied in Lebanon and Jordan with the Syrian refugees and in Turkey. But it hasn't outreached the biggest number of people who are in need. And this is where I believe, and I want your opinion on that technology should assist in more innovative ways to outreach the highest number of people who are in need.
No, and this is coming. I mean, every year there is more people reached by cash and vouchers and so on. We're also better in communicating to the people, because that's been a recurrent problem, is that we decide what they need. We decide what their needs are. We don't really consult.
When you say we decide what they need, is it through your partnership with the local NGOs, or you decide what they need as an international organization?
No, I mean, it's our expert going out and seeing, well, this is the devastation, okay, they need shelter. Let's find a model shelter and we put it up. There is very little food. The basic food stocks is this and that. Here's the monthly or weekly ration. We give them bulk food and so on. Very often that can be also a very effective, efficient kind of a emergency relief. The market may not function. There is a very bad nutritional situation and so on. So yes, we have experts who know how to help people. But we need to have a two-way stream, asking the family, so now you got to the first food, what is now your priorities? What would you want us to do for you, basically? And that two-way stream, I think new technology can also help do. My organization and many others have given now tablets to communities where they send us feedback all the time. We can do education now via the internet to the most remote groups. We can have a talented student in refugee camps being lectured by professors at Harvard, and they can reach very high levels. There is a lot of possibilities with technology. Are we too slow? Yeah, we're probably too slow to take on a lot of things. But I'm returning back to, I come now from the Congo, the people who had been displaced 5 times there, again and again seeing their huts being torched by armed militia groups. They don't need a tablet. They don't need another blanket. They need an end to the violence. They need protection.
But if we want to talk about numbers, okay, are there any results that prove how technology helped in humanitarian aid? If we want to talk about numbers or percentages, are there any results that prove how technology had a good impact in humanitarian aid?
Well, yeah, I'm sure there are many.
And in saving lives?
But yeah, well, my number one indicator is, again, that on average, we save a lot more lives. Mortality, morbidity is down, global acute malnutrition is down. Epidemic disease is basically very much down. You see emergency education indicators are very much better in the average emergency.
But it's
now
all
than
about
before.
the access, Jan. There's no access for all this big number of people in need. It's all about the access. This is I think, is the conflict here.
And the majority of the people in great need, we have access to. There are smaller, there is a minority we have zero access to.
Such as?
For example, Syria is a good example. Millions of people, millions, are getting relief and services on both sides of the conflict lines every single month. And then there is 3 million people or so in hard-to-reach areas, including 500,000 in besieged areas, which we are only reaching sporadically, or in besieged areas, not at all. So, of course, that is our main concern. Our main priority is to get to those we're not reaching. But we shouldn't forget that millions and millions and millions do get relief, thanks to generous donors and a lot of hard-working relief workers.
Yes, we thank our general donors a lot. Jan, do NGOs always know what's the best for the people? Should they leave after the work is done, or should they stay as long as there's money?
They shouldn't just stay as long as the money. What we need is a dialogue with donors like Saudi Arabia and others under the impartiality principle, which is needs. So again, I'm telling you, I come from the Congo, and I was shocked to learn that needs have doubled in 2017, and in several of the worst provinces, humanitarian presence has been halved. So the gap was going like this. There is no place in the Middle East, for example, which is like the Congo now in neglect. So we have lack of funding, lack of presence, lack of organizations that give it priority, lack of assistance and protection at the same time. In very many of the places where we are active, we see progress year on and one year after the other. And in natural disasters, it has been continuous improvement. It's in conflict where we're not doing well.
In war zones, you mean?
War zone. And that's why the number of displaced people is now more than 65 million.
Yeah.
When I started humanitarian work in the 1980s and 90s, and for a very long time, it was hovering around 40 million, up and down around 40 million. Now it's 65 million displaced, for two reasons. Wars have become more cruel on civilian population. There is more displacement. There has been more ethnic cleansing-like tendencies. We keep people alive, but we don't protect them. But the other phenomenon is we don't help enough people out of their displacement. And here's the durable solutions. How long should we stay? Well, we should stay until the people have had a solution to the problem, until they are either, if they are displaced, integrated where they are, have a chance to return in safety, voluntary, safe and dignified to their homes, or get relocated to the third place.
But that takes decades most of the time, especially in war zones.
It takes decades. I mean, Palestinian refugees are sitting in Yarmouk, which is a besieged area in Syria, and their grandparents and great-grandparents fled Israel or Palestine at the time.
So there's always this conflict. I mean, obviously you do partnership with local NGOs, okay? But there's always this conflict between the intention of these NGOs and their actions. And this, I guess, applies to small organizations and sometimes to big organizations. So what's your vision on this conflict? I mean, how can you decide between the intention and the action of the NGO or any humanitarian aid group?
Well, I don't know if the intentions are that different between the bigger and the smaller NGOs or agencies. There are good and bad organizations among the big and among the small. We are at our best when we work together. UN system and agencies, Red Cross and Red Crescent system and agencies, which is, of course, have their whole independent mandate and all of that, but can coordinate with the rest of us, and we, the international NGOs, and most importantly, very often underestimated, the local, national civil society organizations. When we work together, we achieve a lot of things. When we work in parallel, it's cost inefficient. We may do stupid things, one group, that will lead to problems for the other ones, for example, in war zones. No, I'm a firm believer, also as a former emergency relief coordinator, firm believer in coordination to the benefit of the people concerned, and I hope that the initiative now to bridge the gap between development, organizations and funding, and humanitarian funding will lead to more emphasis on solutions, durable solutions, livelihoods, way out of the misery. Too many people are trapped in refugee-like, displacement-like situations for generations. Palestinians is a good example. Palestinians in Lebanon is a very sharp example of that.
I want to talk about technology, about the gap between technology and the humanitarian sector. So obviously technology was not made for the need of humanitarian aid, but for commercial development. As an example, people don't buy advanced phones to keep them safe and easily accessible when they are in a crisis. So what does the humanitarian sector require from the private sector who's running the technology to be done? Have you ever thought of any kind of partnership or?
Yeah, well, we think of that every day, really. There are increasing numbers of private sector companies that are providing pro bono services, but also partnership agreements that are very important for us. So NRC, but I mean, UN organizations, other there are many here present from a great non-governmental and other institutions, and we all have partnership agreements now with the private sector. And the idea is to quote one of these big companies who was just sitting down with us. Let's have three phases, as they said: dream, design, and deliver. One example, one thing that we discuss now a lot is connectivity. You know, in Riyadh, it's no problem with connectivity. At the Intercontinental, you can be online all the time. If you're in the countryside in the Congo or in Mali or in the Central African Republic, there is no connectivity. And so where we need the most, really, to be able to communicate with people, how are you doing? What are your needs? How can we help you? Tell us what we're doing wrong. Tell us how you're threatened. Tell us what is hitting you. There is no connectivity. When our my colleagues, the field workers, are most threatened, we often have the biggest connectivity problems. That can be solved. I don't know whether it's going to be the balloons or the big masts, or it's going to be satellites or whatever. It will be fixed. So we will, I think, within a short period of time, have connectivity to the hard-to-reach places, and that will be in itself a big step forward.
So this again goes to the point where we mostly used to a path of one way of aid, where a huge body of aid reflects and provides aid to a certain number of people. So how can we engage more of those communities into technology as well?
The most vulnerable.
Yes.
Yeah. No, through education, through sharing technology, to engaging them. I am struck by the following thing that I was informed by a technology person saying to me: the average refugee family will in 4 or 5 years have a smartphone in their hands that is more advanced than NASA have or the White House is using at the moment. So what does that mean with us? Well, we can communicate in a very different manner, both ways. We can We can transfer, valuables differently. We can have education differently. So it's a big revolution. And then we think that this will take a long time to educate them in that. No, it will not. I mean, you look at the young girl or boy in a displacement, improvised displacement camp. Well, they're better on their tablet than I would be, and they help their family. So I am an optimist in assistance becoming increasingly effective also through this, but I'm also cautioning, saying it takes 12 young men with Kalashnikovs to blow away the most phenomenal technological masterpiece that we and the people concerned built. So the violence will remain a huge problem, and I think we need to discuss more how do we protect people, not just how we are finding gadgets to help them.
Jan, for the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of crowdfunding done through social media. Mm-hmm. One person would go on his blog or her blog or on Facebook, she would put pictures or a status trying to help some other person in need. And we've seen a lot of success stories that were done. Yeah. And funding that was done easily, maybe quicker than going through the classical channels of humanitarian aid. What do you think of such ways in raising funds, and would you work parallel with those people, or does it contradict with your work, or does it work parallel with it?
No, I'd like to work with more with my organization needs to be better in using social media for fundraising, for example. Mm-hmm. We want to do that. Again, I would caution against one thing. The social media and crowdfunding is very often oriented to one family, one person, one story of one individual, and then they crowdfund for that one. We, as humanitarians, are governed by the principles of impartiality. It's the greatest need, not your greatest visibility in social media, whatever. So the women I met in the Congo just over a week ago have a very little chance of getting a crowdfunding. I mean, there's nobody there, basically. We need then to be able to have the crowdfunding for a general community, not for one individual or one person to help this one person to Harvard. Well, yeah, I think that's a very good thing. But I will also say help Congo, help the widows of Congo. There are tens of thousands of them.
Is there a way, I mean, what is the role of governments in humanitarian innovations? Where's the responsibility of the governments here?
Well, the responsibility of the governments is to facilitate innovation, I think, facilitate private sector and humanitarian groups to innovate. Also, I think the governmental donors at times can be a little bit more risk-taking. Say, okay, you have an opportunity to reach people now in hard-to-reach areas through a new innovation. We're willing to take a risk in funding you for that. Often, one problem I have among donors these last 10 years is that they are very scared of the media, and they're very scared of a scandal that would make the taxpayers very angry. Well, I think I'm a taxpayer as well. I am very interested in seeing that humanitarian relief is more effective and efficient. And then there has also to be some risk-taking. In the countryside of Afghanistan, where very few organizations can work, we found that several times we do innovation, or we do even effort to stay in places, and then Taliban takes over or whoever, and then our place is torched.